Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. It gives me great pleasure to have a returning guest on. She's been on a couple of times before. She's the filmmaker of the movie Terrain, which involved Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and she's made other movies as well. Welcome to the show again, Marcelina, or Marcy, as we like to call you.
Thank you so much, Billy. It's always nice to chat with you.
That's good. We've got a bit of a time difference here. Normally, I'm the one up at night, you in the morning, but we've done a role reversal 9 o'clock in the morning, UK, 11 o'clock in Hawaii. What's life like in Hawaii these days?
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock in Hawaii right now and at night, and I'm in a yurt. So I have the challenge of sleeping next to a tree full of chickens and roosters, literally 10 feet outside of the canvas, not even that far, maybe 5 feet.
All right.
And you may hear them go off because they do this all night long.
All
And
right.
it's so hard to when they're right in your ear, to get a good night's sleep. If any of your viewers are experts on chickens, these are not chickens in coops, they're chickens that live in trees. They're wild chickens.
All right.
So, anyway, it's been hard to get sleep. And I've just come from California, so I'm still on California time too. So it's pretty late, but I'll try and be as perky as
Don't
I
worry.
can.
We're both tired, but we'll muddle on through. You got to do what you got to do in this
Yeah,
business.
exactly.
Talking to chickens, what do you think of this old eggs thing? And basically, there's lots of things about eggs. Eggs farms going up, no eggs in the shops. People saying eggs are healing the spike protein or some nonsense like that.
Yeah.
Eggs, what's the deal with them?
It's just another scarcity scare strategy to get people off their center, basically, ungrounded, fearful that something else is down the pike. And again, once again, it's based on believing in a pathogen, believing in a germ that's going to cause all these problems. And sadly, the amount of birds that have been just completely, decimated. And I've heard that the way they kill birds en masse like that is really cruel. Um, I just think it's horrible, but I think the worst part about it is that once again we're being put in front of an opportunity to take our power back to look and see how we're being manipulated. And I don't really know, are people buying this chicken thing? Because I haven't heard anybody talking about it except what I've heard come across, like, posts on media, social media. And I'm not even on much, so I'm on Telegram. That's about it. Um, so are people really even talking about this? Because I haven't heard anything from neighbors, and I haven't seen shortages of chicken eggs at the store. Um, I don't
All I've
know. Is
seen
it?
is like it says that you're limited to two boxes of eggs in their store, so whether they're playing it up or not. But there's quite a few videos I've seen of like airplanes going over certain ranches, or they're having some feed, and the chickens in the farms are getting killed. I don't know
Yeah.
how prevalent that is, but again, you can. This just seems to be a thing in the media, and these things come in, as you say, on purpose. Just there's this week's thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just another one of these strategies to create this sense of scarcity and fear. And you
I think
know,
that's what the toilet roll was one at the start of the pandemic. It was like, I don't know if you had that in America, but certainly in UK, it was a toilet roll shortage and everyone's shitting
yes,
themselves.
I remember that. I remember that, and I do remember there being a lot of chaos over that. People filling their cars with toilet paper. I saw that kind of thing myself. You know, this is something that I think is actually really important to talk about. Is that we're so conditioned to just depend on five senses to basically explain our reality and explain how to react to things. It informs us how to, because we get we get taken in with things like fear. And what we don't realize is that there's so many more senses, I'm pretty sure, than the five senses. But one of the obvious ones is how we feel about things. And it's not really considered a sense. I mean, touch is considered a sense, but how we feel about things is not really considered a sense. And we've lost the ability to sort of discern um, a situation. The eggs being, another example. But if we look back at the whole COVID thing, when it first got started, I call it the three F's. You had fear, force, and FU. Those are the three things you had. And if you think about how that makes you feel, it makes you feel, I mean, how does it make, maybe I should ask you, how does it make you feel to feel fear in the air, force, and this sort of, who cares what you think? We're not here to really listen to you. Obviously, that's why you've got a mask on your face. I mean, does that give you a warm feeling?
No, it makes me raging.
Exactly. And so if we had been grounded at that moment, it would have never gone anywhere, because we would have been able to see through it immediately, sense and feel that fear frequency. And people say, well, is there really such thing as contagion? And we've shown, or I mean, I haven't, but I tried to show it in the film. But basically, contagion's never been able to be proven, one pathogen going from one person to another. But fear is extremely contagious, and it's a frequency, a low vibrating frequency. And when you have fear or anger or these types of low vibrating frequencies, and we've talked about this before, they seek resonance. And this is the big strategy in the pocket of the global elite, is how to keep people controlled with this constant barrage of nothing but things to be afraid of. And if we would just stop and think about how that feels, and that would actually be something that was respected and understood as a powerful sense, then I think we would say, this feels like a lot of bullshit and I'm not going for it. And that's kind of how the eggs thing felt to me. I didn't even hardly tune into any of it, because it's just so clear that these narratives keep getting rolled out to just give us, there's this whole one with water too. In California, they literally dump out the reservoirs. They literally dump them out. I have articles from a variety of different publications talking about the fish that they're trying to preserve has something to do with letting water out of the reservoirs and putting them, well, they were dumping it into the ocean, but they were claiming that they were doing this for some fish. Now, in California, where drought, which is man-made, it's geoengineered drought, and fire are such an issue, which keeps everybody in a constant state of feeling panicked, ungrounded. People do the stupidest things. They cut all their trees down around their houses. It's like they demonize nature. And suddenly, if there's a eucalyptus anywhere, it's to be feared as if it's, some sort of a boogeyman. And people, they spend all of this time, which they don't even look up. And it's like we're being geoengineered constantly in California with very few breaks. And you see these trees all dying and falling over, and you see the insect population in huge decline, and yet they're all cutting down their trees and creating erosion problems and all kinds of other things out of this fear that's being induced, that there's not enough water, that we're in a drought. These things are all, people, if they would not buy the narrative, then the next step would be to not consent to any of that. And eventually that, I think, would create a new consciousness, which I think is actually happening. It's just unfortunately not happening as quickly as some people would like it to happen. And maybe it's happening too quickly for others. I don't know. But I see that there's sort of a shift. And I also feel that our science is not, it really needs to ramp up and bring in to the discussion the importance of more than just what the five senses. In other words, I think we're moving into more of a quantum multidimensional space, and our science is falling way behind. And that, I'm talking about the good science, not the phony science that's been behind the whole COVID thing. But even the good science, if there are more ways to control an outcome through thought and feeling, then we have to question even things like control experiments. I mean, you know, this is where we are in our science and the good science we've been wanting that we didn't get during COVID. But even that is feeling to me like it's falling behind the progress that's being made in the quote universe or whatever you want to call it. I feel like there are too many people waking up to the multidimensionality of things. And I think when you look at this, it changes the whole nature of reality. There's a lot of discussion always, these arguments about like the shape of the earth. Is it flat? Is it round? And that, it could be rather a militant discussion. I don't think we have on board the senses enough of the good senses that we're not even aware of to make these assessments. I mean, because what we see in this 3D reality is not necessarily what is real. And it's really hard to make these decisions so firmly when things could look very, very different from a different dimension. And I don't know, I'm hoping that this will become, it feels like people are starting to shift into this kind of awareness. I think the more the better. I think it's a little bit difficult because you have to really unlearn and unknow what you know. And that is extremely hard for the more indoctrinated people who are the educated. It's a very, very tough lesson. And anyway, does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you talk about fear. I was listening to Larkin Rose. He's done a little video recently. It was about half an hour, and he was going into how people, again, they're switched off from these senses. So I said to him, I would be raging, and that's what made me start doing these shows and, shouting away here, because basically we have that sense of anger, and we don't, people have lost that kind of righteous, indignation kind of thing, that wanted that righteous anger to motivate them, because these emotions are there to serve a purpose. But we get taught that anger is a bad thing. So you've got all the woke brigade all being so nicey, and they're saying words like, I'm going to unalive myself, because they don't like using the word suicide. It's just everything's becoming wishy-washy, and we're taught to, ignore our feelings and then suppress them, and that just creates more problems. And all the cognitive dissonance, so you just keep suppressing stuff and not looking at the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to explain this to people at work and saying, I mentioned the word unlearn, and then they just ridicule you. It's like, unlearn? What are you talking about, mate? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, forgetting there's a lot of people not up to speed with a lot of this stuff, and it's like, I've got a long way to go.
It feels like what you're saying about emotions is really important because I think that emotions are our way of going into a deeper space to try and understand something we're supposed to be looking at. The problem with emotions when they become looping thought streams that start to dominate our way of living and behaving. But I think anger has an actually really appropriate place. I don't know if I told you this before. I never can remember what we've talked about exactly, but I once went over, this is in California, I went over to the city to a sound. It was like not a university, it was more like some kind of sound school where they were using sound therapies to help people. And it was really interesting. They had a ton of different stuff, things you could lie on that you hear, tuning, all this, sound vibrational stuff. And when I asked the question about how they treat what they do with people who have like OCD or, looping thought patterns, logical looping, he said something really interesting. He said, rather than, this sort of trying to calm the nervous system and bring things into a sort of grounding perspective, what they do with people like that is they literally clash almost two discordant tones that are really shocking to the body, and they're loud, and they put somebody in just a jolt situation. And it's to break that thought pattern. And I thought, boy, that's a really interesting metaphor for anger, because sometimes, or people say, oh, you lost your temper and you need to control your anger or something like that. And I think that at times people need a jolt, and sometimes people flip their switch because they're just so sick and tired of something, which happened to me a lot during the COVID thing with the masks. I used to get in these squabbles. In fact, even recently, because I just came from California, and in Berkeley, if you go into a grocery store, still 75% of the people are wearing masks. And I got chased around with a box of masks and told to put them on. And this just recently, a couple weeks ago.
Even
And
though there's no law anymore.
yeah, I said, no, there never was. And I said,
Right.
absolutely not. I'm not wearing a mask. And she said, well, then we're going to have to ask you to leave. And I just walked right by her. So she chases me down with the box of masks, and she says, excuse me, ma'am, you're going to have to put this on or you're going to have to leave. I said, I'm not putting it on. And if you want me to leave, you're going to need to call the cops. And then she just floundered. She's like, oh, I could just see her wheels turning. What happened to all my superpowers? Where did my
Yeah.
superpowers go?
Right.
And then she goes and she complains to the shop owner, who was literally selling the shop. And so everything was half off and they were trying to get rid of stuff. And the shop owner said to her, that wasn't very nice what she said, meaning me. She said, but maybe you should go outside and wait until she leaves. And I'm like, you know, finally, they're not trying to push. I was literally going to hold out until the cops showed up, because what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Um,
This is the thing. Nobody takes the action anymore of just saying no. The power of the word no. People just
it,
succumb without, because they're taught by authority to obey.
well, this is the whole lesson of this. If there was a silver lining to this COVID thing, which I think that there is, because it's really has jolted people into considering new realities and how they want to govern their lives, at least those that have chosen to take the opportunity as an opportunity for growth. And I don't know how easy it would be to pull this pandemic thing off again. I guess it would be, how well can they stage fear? That, because fear is so powerful, it's such a low vibration. It's like it's a real tip off to anything, whether you would fall for it or not. If it's attached to fear, pretty much I'd say do an about face and go the other way, because if they're pushing fear, there's an agenda. And people have to learn how to say no. I'm just still kind of mesmerized about how it didn't get picked up at the very beginning, about how creepy the whole thing was. Um, it's literally creepy. And now that you see all of these people dying and having health problems, they're starting to question. I mean, a lot of people are still fighting for this and believing in the whole, germs attacking me thing. But a lot of people are stopping, taking, I call them the hoaxy pokies, it seems like they're not agreeing to take the boosters. And I think this memo is getting to the elite. So they've got a whole other thing staged, lots of things staged. And it's up to us to see through these narratives. If we're not grounded and we don't understand how to discern the difference between fear and something that needs our attention, and how to execute a non-fearful response instead of just react, then it makes it bad for everybody, because then we have to put up with this craziness. So I'm really hoping that people are starting to recognize that there's a greater lesson here. For me personally, I've had to go through a lot of personal stuff, mostly because of the difference in perspectives in our family. And I've had to go inward and do a lot of what I guess you would call personal, spiritual, that kind of work. And that's why I've been spending so much time in Hawaii, because it's a lot easier to do here. And it, like, I just keep having more and more experiences that show me that consciousness is something very important to pay attention to, and it goes way beyond what we think it is. It's so multidimensional. Everything has consciousness. I was down at the beach about a month ago, and I was laying on my towel on my stomach looking for these teeny tiny little shells that they make leis out of. They're very expensive leis. I was just doing it for fun. And I was collecting these shells, and I'd been collecting them on my towel for, I don't know, half an hour or so, and I had a little pile of them. And all of a sudden, this wave just came up and soaked me and the towel and took all these little shells and completely soaked the towel. So I'm like, so I got up and I pulled my towel up by the trees higher up, and I was like kind of pissed that all my shells were gone. And then I realized my car keys were gone. So I went, oh no. So I went down to the shore and I started wading through looking for my car keys. I couldn't find them anywhere. They weren't anywhere to be found. So I thought, I'll go back up to my towel and get my goggles, and I'll come down here and get in the water and I'll look for them. And I went over to another towel where a woman was with her child. I said, do you have a cell phone? And she said, yeah. I said, can I call my daughter? Because I'm going to need a ride. My keys are in the ocean. So we called my daughter, and then I went back down and I kept looking and looking for the keys. I couldn't find them anywhere. And then I started to kind of give up, and I turned around to go back up to my towel, and I saw this shell, a big shell. And by big, I mean, it was like about, an inch and a half, but it was perfect. And here in Kauai, you never find a perfect shell. They're always remnants. And I thought, oh, this is so beautiful. And the way the light was shining through the thin lip and everything, so pretty. And I was going, oh, this is so pretty. It was like a lure. It was like sitting there like a lure. And so I picked the shell up and I thought, oh, I get it. You get my keys and I get the shell. So I walk up to my towel and I'm thinking, wait a minute. That was a lure. And I go, I think that the ocean wants to have a little conversation. I think that if the ocean really wanted this shell back, there would have been an animal in it. There's no animal in it. This is a shell that has been vacated. So I thought, okay, how about if I give you your shell back and you give me my car keys back? And I turned around and took about 3 steps, and a wave washed the keys up to my feet. Just like that. Now, this may seem strange, but it was the second ocean taking things incident. My daughter got married here, and the day after her wedding, her husband lost his ring in the waves. Right. And he got out of the water so distraught because they thought it was an omen or something. They were really upset about it. And they were with a friend, and the friend did a little prayer, and, she's, just a religious prayer. And then this Hawaiian woman saw them and came over and said, what's going on? And she said, oh, they lost my husband's ring. They were all in tears and upset about it. And the Hawaiian woman said, sometimes, because this is where the river was going into the sea, she goes, sometimes the river takes things. But if we ask the ocean will talk with the river and you will get it back. And then she started doing a Hawaiian prayer. And then she left. And this was out in the waves. This was not like at the ankle where I lost my keys. So my son shows up, and he was meeting them down there, and he's all, what's the matter? And they said, Ethan lost his ring. It's out in the ocean. And my son Teddy looks out at the water. He goes, where? Like over there? And they go, oh, out there in those waves. And we were playing in the waves, and Teddy's sitting here looking at the currents, and he's thinking, the river's coming in. There's a little eddy, da, 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 da. He gets in the water, and he swims out into the waves, and he dives down in this area that he determined the current might have taken the ring. And he had this inspiration to make butterfly wings under the water. So he goes down to the sand and makes butterfly wings, and he lifts the ring out of the water. I mean, there is no way. And this was one beach over from the one where I lost my keys. And the day I lost my keys, my daughter Sydney came down to pick me up, and she was getting annoyed with me because I'm always losing goggles, and she's always saying, you don't have your glasses on, you can't even look for them, and she's always getting mad at me. And so now she was kind of mad that I lost the car keys. And so, but I found them by the time she got there. And then I tried to coax her to go with me on a wave safari because they were having huge waves that day down at some other beaches. And she said no, she'd had things to do on the farm. I begged her, and then I bribed her with an acai bowl. So she said, okay, I'll go. So I bought her an acai bowl, and we went over to Waikoko, where we saw these waves that were just humongous. It was so majestic. It was so thrilling. And this is a beach that I swim at in the summertime, and it was deadly. You would never go into rocks with big. And then we go, after the wave safari is over, we go back to where she had parked the car to pick me up at the beach where I lost the keys. And she was parked up on the street, and she looks down to open up her car, and there's this perfect shell there, perfect little shell. And she goes, Mom, I think this is for you. And I realized I was getting a message. I was communicating with the consciousness of that water.
Well,
And
we're
I
all
was,
water, aren't we?
and it wasn't the first time that, after the wedding ring thing, that stuck in our heads. And this is now the second time, just one beach over, we've had this kind of thing happen with with the ocean. So I thought, these kinds of things are happening more and more in my life. And I feel like it's just a sign of everything has consciousness, and therefore everything that we put out is going to try and seek some form of resonance. And so we're really responsible for what we put out. And that even means what we think. We're putting out an energy field consciously, or maybe unconsciously, but it's going out one way or another, and it's seeking resonance. And if we don't understand the responsibility of that, then we'll keep deferring to authority to tell us what to think, and we'll keep creating these low vibrating situations. But if we realize, hey, if I put this kind of energy out there and somebody else picks up on it, there's going to be an elevation in consciousness, just because that's the law of nature. It's just the way it is.
What you're putting out, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like the anger thing, I'm not saying you feel anger, then you dwell in anger and you just go around angry all the time. The whole point of the anger is to motivate you to do the action, and then to get to do the thing that's going to stop you making angry and make you happy, or whatever. So these things can be signals, but you don't dwell in them, because then you're just going around, putting that out into the world.
Yeah, when you dwell on them, then you become a victim. So instead, it's better to look at the emotion and think, why did I have that emotion, or why did I experience somebody having that emotion? How and what did I contribute, or what am I here to contribute? And be really aware of, just mindful of what it means in that moment, and then take the next best step, rather than spiraling downward into depression or these kinds of things. These are all, issues of the ego. But when we really understand that everything literally is connected, I mean, this is not some woo-woo statement. It's literally everything is connected through energy fields, everything. And so we've got this constant transport back and forth of information constantly with everything. I mean, even inanimate objects have energy fields, and, they're made from things from the earth and made by somebody. So they've got energy signatures. And it might not be the same as the energy signature of something that we see living right in front of us, but everything has consciousness. And so everything we do matters. And this is the lesson, I think, of COVID, because we had everything taken away from us, and we had literal violation of our sovereignty, of our rights, of our bodies. And people are paying big prices for that now with their lives. And it's ruined so many lives, but it was a choice. It was a tough love lesson, I think. And how many people will get that and move on to creating something that's coming more from a understanding of everything connects and everything I think and say and do matters. So I'm not going to take advantage of you because it's the same as taking advantage of myself. And I this is the lesson. Will the lesson be learned by, I don't know.
Well, people talk about sovereignty and stuff like that, and it was taken away, but we have to, as you say, take it back and learn that we're the creators of our own reality. And
Yeah.
only by the world will change when people change. And you say everything we do matters. And Bill Hicks had to quote, matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. So the water, when you go into a room, the water experiment, you project love into it as beautiful crystals, anger, dirty crystals. Yeah, and there seems to be a feedback loop. We don't understand that very much. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess there must be a way to harness that more. I guess some magicians or black magic, white magic, or whatever these people do, they're focusing their intention through the ritual, whatever, for a desired outcome. But we
Right.
kind of have a scattered approach to what we want to create. But again, if we were taught to harness our power, then we would be far more powerful than we are. And obviously, the establishment don't want that because they seek
No,
to control.
we're conditioned and socialized to not think that way. And that happens from the moment that you are born onto this planet. And everything that is set up in every structure is set up to keep us unaware of our own power. And, you know, at some point, that's our fault. Because when, action is and inaction are both forms of a consent. And I think inaction is actually, for me, the more difficult of the two. It's interesting, Dr. Emoto, that you just referenced with the water samples. He said that the sample that was ignored, there was one that was, given love and one that was
Yeah,
given hate and one that was ignored.
that's
The
right. Yeah,
ignored one was the one that came out the worst.
yeah.
It was the one that was the most, disgusting in its, stuff growing and all of that. And if you look at that word ignore or ignorance, it has the word ignore in it. It's a choice. It's a choice to not try to expand consciousness. It's a choice. And it's a difficult choice for a lot of people because they don't want to go to the trouble to do it, because it means unlearning a lot of things or having to go against the grain the way that we've been taught to behave. And the beauty of it is new things pop up that I've never seen so much new stuff popping up. There's this whole homeschooling movement that's really caught fire. People are really understanding that the school systems are actually really dangerous places to put your kids.
Totally.
And, yeah. And, you know, for so many reasons. I mean, not just the vaccine stuff, but, the way they teach you to just focus on getting a good grade on a test and then never thinking for yourself. I think people are, they're thinking, I want a different health system. I want, then you've got the whole legal system that's coming out too, that
Right.
everything's a corporation and we're owned and we have these CQV accounts, that trust funds that we're born with. And, there's so much information coming out. So there's this whole movement to take back, the financial system and take back our legal or lawful place in society. You look at the environmental movement. There are people really waking up to what's causing this climate change, and it's geoengineering and weather manipulation, and this kind of stuff is real, and it's causing some huge health problems. huge emotional problems because I think it really screws with your head. When I'm in California, I have a much harder time grounding. Here in Hawaii, it's easy. You know, I go down to the ocean, I swim, I lay on the sand, I'm in the sunshine. Back at home, there's just such a energy of intellectual, competitive, money making, geoengineered skies constantly, people coughing, not asking why they're coughing, having health issues one after another without even at looking up to see what they're breathing every day or understanding the food system, the water system, anything of the things, and then just looking at these ridiculous explanations for what's making them sick. Oh, I have a virus. Oh, it must be a virus. Virus meaning we don't know what it is. That's what they tell you. If they don't know what it is, it's a virus. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I just I wish it was happening more quickly. The astrologers all say that it's there's this whole big shift happening. Um, and
The,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because you talk about fear and that, we just seem to have got over COVID and everyone's looking back, oh God, what a shit show that was. And those of us are awake. But now, without even having any time to rest from that, all of a sudden these 50-minute cities are popping up in the UK, and just like it's the open air prisons coming at you, and it's just like, hold on, that was bad. But now they're going to bring this, and this is a million times worse. It's just like, they're just up the ante, And now everyone's scrambling around, all right, what are we going to do to stop these? What are we going to do to stop these? And
I
that's
saw
going
some
on.
video footage there somewhere in England where some men were coming out at night and ripping down those barriers, and
Yeah,
I'm really hoping people are going to just roar no to this when they understand what's going on. Problem is they don't know what's going on.
that's it. So this
They're
was
putting
under the
them up.
radar. COVID was a big, announcement. Here's COVID, but this one's done. Oh, we've been having these discussions in your local community. You've not been paying any attention. We're three of them down the road, and we're just about to implement it.
And they're
So
making excuses. They're telling people, like in the Berkeley area and Oakland area, they're telling people that they're putting up these barriers to keep the prostitutes out.
right,
Okay, so people then get on the news and go, I'm so glad they're cleaning up my community. And
right,
it's like, are you using your head? Because you're going to be stuck on the other side of that little tiny thing that'll only allow one car out at a time. And they've got surveillance cameras on every street corner, like pointing on this side, on this side, on that
yep,
side, and on that side. So you've got like 4 sets of 2 cameras. They have them here in Hawaii too. Uh, so definitely there are these plans in the works, and the only way that they're going to succeed is if people don't say anything. This is why I think this inaction is worse than the we were just talking about the ignoring thing. I find that the most offensive of all, because it's just cowardly and it's lazy and it's irresponsible. And I understand how hard it is to face these realities and to grieve over literally what people perceive the reality to have been. It isn't what they thought it was. It
yep,
never was. But
right,
they're they're grieving over that, as we all were. But a lot of us knew that it wasn't that what we thought it was. But like, I mean, I figured that out, some years ago because I was prompted to think about cheating in elections. And you start down these, what they call rabbit holes, and pretty soon you have a lot of choices of tunnels to go explore, and they all end up connecting. They don't seem like they do at first, but they do. And then it hits you, and you go through this horrible period of just, you know, sheer, you know, despair over understanding the way the world is run. And you really go through stages of grief. And then when you get through that, which could take a long time, or it could be a quick, somebody could learn that quickly. For me, it took a while, mostly because I was getting a lot of pushback, and I had to keep fighting to to say, I'm observing this. How can you not see this? But once you finally get through that, it's, I don't know, there's a whole new reality that starts to open up that has more to do with creating what you want. And that's where I feel like I'm really entering into right now. And that's where I'm putting my focus. I've shifted, I don't spend so much time looking at the ills of the world and the way it works, because it just sucks my energy out. And I feel like I did what I could do for society making the film. It was a hard film to make, a lot to learn, a lot to have to figure out how to communicate that difficult information, because it was difficult for me too. I had to unlearn, even though I'm not a scientist, I still had to unlearn, basic understandings, face mistakes I've made. It was a hard time. And I feel like now I'm much more interested in creating. And I think when we find our own sort of inner yearnings and we satisfy them and we explore them, our signature becomes stronger. And even though everything's connected and we're part of a whole, our light gets a little brighter. And I think that holds a light space for others that resonate with that. And it ends up, just by being who you are, it ends up helping the world. That's the way I feel. And so I feel like this is the lesson here in front of us, how to be authentically true to ourselves and live, in a way that's in concert with the natural laws, so that everybody understands the responsibility of putting out good stuff. I mean, that's how I feel. It's taken a long time to get here, and a lot of spiritual work, going inward, meditating a lot, um, trying to understand dreams, having a lot of synchronicities and experiences. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at, and that's how I'm choosing to move forward. And it's also affected my relationship in a positive way, because even though we made very different choices, I really understand that people are on their own journeys, and that they're as frustrating as it is, because the choices that get made affect everybody. I don't have control over that. And it's sort of an intrusion, a violation of natural law, to intrude on somebody else's journey. It's a law of intrusion. And so I've really decided the way that I handle things is to always take advantage of every opportunity to state what I know. Because if I don't share what I know when the opportunities present, I'm squandering that knowledge that I worked hard for and that I have a responsibility to impart. But I have to discern the situation and not do it in a forceful way. And I think, because of all of the chaos of COVID and the way that all unraveled, I was doing a lot of reacting myself, which I don't have regrets about. I think it was part of that anger thing you were talking about, which I think was a necessary step. But now I kind of feel like, I mean, in part, it could be things have calmed down somewhat. Um, but I'm never, ever again going to be reluctant to speak my truth at a moment of opportunity. And when people say things to me, out in the world, and they say something that's incorrect, it's almost always about a virus. I say something, and I don't fight with them and argue with them. I just say, that's really not true. And if you research, you'll understand this. This is what frustrates me so much about, I was mentioning to you earlier, I call them the Monday, Wednesday, Friday doctors and scientists and journalists, and they all know who they are. I don't need to mention any names, but it's pretty obvious who they are. And
And
they
once
have,
people feel bored with the no virus story, they're dancing around, 97.
they're part of the advocacy truth community, so they say, but they only tell partial truth. This has actually been a bone of contention with my friends. They get mad at me because they say, "Did you hear what so and so said on his show?" I go, "I don't listen to that show. It's partial truth and you're being baited." And how could you say that when he's doing such good work and he's out there telling, the truth about this and that? He might not have that right, but we can't sit here and argue about viruses. And I think to myself, do you understand the depth of what you're saying? It's sort of like saying, um, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, uh, they don't spray the fields with glyphosate, but they do on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But we're not talking about Tuesday and Thursday. Or you ask your spouse, or you find out your spouse, or you suspect your spouse has been fooling around. You say, "Where were you last Friday night?" I mean, this has not happened to me, but I understand that people have these conversations, and they say, "Oh, I was with my buddy on Friday night." He doesn't tell you about Thursday night, and so you think it's not a thing because you were basically manipulated into a reality that's not real. And I think to myself, if you continue to hold on to these germ theory narratives, then the entire way everything goes, and I'm talking about not just vaccines, but antibiotics and all kinds of other things, this continues to be the modalities, these modalities of treatment, which are poisonous. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't times and places for them, but generally speaking, there are so many better healing modalities out, so many more healing modalities out there. The whole paradigm could shift if we could embrace the truth that there's no such thing as these things that come in and attack us like this and then make us a body of contagion, that passes on to other people. And if people could just grasp that, you know, so many of these medical things would just fall to pieces, and so I don't like this argument of, well, they're doing some good work. It's like, you need to tell me the whole truth,
Yeah.
unless there's a good reason for you not to. Like, I mean, if I was, escaping danger, I might not tell the truth about where I've got the key. you know I might have to lie. But in these situations where these people know the truth, these doctors, these journalists know. I mean, they've been confronted, they know.
Yep.
They have some sort of an agenda, and I don't know what it is. I'm not going to speak about other people's agendas, but I do know that it's a choice to not tell the whole truth, and there's a reason why you don't tell the whole truth. And then you get caught up in all these tail chasing narratives. And one of them that's happening even within the truth community that I love is people keep using this term terrain theory. And then they engage in what they think is a realistic debate between terrain and germ theories. Now, here's the problem I have with this. Terrain is a word. It means like ecosystem or something like that. Maybe Webster defines it differently, but it's basically that. When the ecosystem's healthy, the terrain is healthy. When the ecosystem's out of balance, there's sickness and poor health. And so you've got like a desert, that's a terrain. You've got a river, that's a terrain. They're not theories. It's not a theory that that's a river or that that's a desert. There may be theories about the way you want to manage your terrain or understand your terrain, but the terrain itself is just a word. So if you have like a tree and you see this beautiful photosynthesizer that has this direct relationship with the sun to produce leaves and flowers and fruit and draws nutrients up its trunk, going against gravity and communicating with the mycelium, the mycorrhizae, and the soil, and all these networks with all these other trees and plants, and they're exchanging things. I'll give you this if you give me that, and the bugs in the ground are creating all of this life, and that's called the terrain. And then you say, okay, let's debate with Hello Kitty.
Aye.
You know, Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to have a debate with Hello Kitty. Terrain versus germ theory. So then how do you make Hello Kitty real? Well, you pump some fear in there. So when I was pregnant with my second child, this is back 30 years ago, um, I had a cat that had some kind of colon blow issue and had made a big mess, and I went and cleaned it up. And then I don't remember exactly how the word got out. It got on a sweater, and I can't remember if I took it to, I don't remember. But anyway, somehow the word got out, and somebody said to me, "Oh my God, you're pregnant and you cleaned a litter box? You cleaned up cat poop?" Well, yeah, what's the big deal? And they said, "Oh my God, you need to tell your doctor." So I mentioned to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Oh, you should never do that." Why not? Well, there's a virus called toxoplasmosis.
Right.
And if you have been exposed to toxoplasmosis, your fetus could be exposed, and we would recommend aborting because it's
Jesus.
that dangerous. If, but we're going to have to do some tests. So what do? They send me off for antibody tests to see if I'm carrying the antibodies for this alleged virus. Well, wouldn't you know, they came back positive, which remind me we need to discuss antibodies because there's
I was
something
going
very
to.
important. Yeah. But to stick with the story, mine came back that I had antibodies to toxoplasmosis. So then the question became, well, when was the exposure? Have you ever lived in a foreign country, a third world country? Yes, actually, after I got married, I lived in Puerto Rico for a while, and I traveled all around South America. Well, you could have been exposed to toxoplasmosis in those situations because it's fecal matter that can get onto lettuce and things that aren't washed properly, and cats carry this in their fecal matter. And I'm like, oh my God. So then they said, we're going to need to test the cat to see if the cat has a current antibody, whatever they're looking at, or a past exposure. So we go through the whole cat thing, and the blood had to be, and I was just so stupid. I mean, look back at my ignorance, and it's amazing. But so I'm like, oh my God, so I'm like getting the cat tested, and the blood had to be sent from Stanford to some other lab on the East Coast, and it was going to take 2 weeks, and da 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 da. And they finally determined that both the cat and me had previous exposures. So this wasn't a new exposure, and therefore the fetus was safe. And I went through hell. This was like a month of, them telling me if these come back, we would recommend terminating the pregnancy. This is what they
All the
told
while
me.
you're worried and fearful, and your baby's picking up and all that stuff.
Yeah, fortunately she turned out great, and she's one of my most favorite people on the planet. My second daughter Julia, and all my kids, but this is the one that the toxoplasma. So okay, so let's take this back to Hello Kitty. Hello Kitty's a kitty, right? So let's make this story real. Let's say that Hello Kitty is passing around toxoplasmosis. Now you're going to have a ton of women afraid of some virus out there that doesn't exist, and they're going to go get these ridiculous antibody tests, which is what the whole AIDS thing was about, antibody tests. And what I wanted to say about antibodies is that I was just discussing this with Andy last week, and Tom Cowan did a video on this too on his podcast. There's Antibodies are non-specific. They're just something in our bodies that tries to basically wrap up an invader, a toxin of sorts. It doesn't mean that that's an entering virus. It could be that you had just had a vaccine, and they go out, they send their forces out to deal with the foreign invasion.
So,
But
in other
it's
words,
not,
for the health system to get rid of the poison, we don't
or
have an
to
immune system which forms specific antibodies to deal with specific
well,
poisons
but
that they
but the
form.
thing is, the antibodies are not specific, so they don't just bind to one thing. They're not this boutique antibody that says, "Oh my God," because like if you look at like something like polio, they say was caused by a virus, but it was really caused from DDT poisoning. So do we really believe that we have an antibody for DDT? It's ridiculous. It's they're basically just dealing with invasion of toxin mostly, and then they're there's another step after that, it's, and if you see a lot of antibodies, it means you're sick. Your body's in a defensive mode or offensive in a way. And so Andy was saying there's no such thing as a specific, it doesn't attach to one thing. So then I said that means the entire vaccine industry is based on a complete,
Well,
it's just smoke and mirrors that these things attach. And Andy said, well, the step before that is that the things they're saying they're going after don't even exist.
yeah.
But then they say that they're giving you a vaccine so that it will go and it will prevent you from getting a sickness like measles or whatever, and you will carry around that antibody for the rest of your life. They never saw a measles virus. They saw cell breakdown from some sort of toxin, and that's why you're not going to necessarily see that again, or you might experience a flu and not know that. It's just the whole way they're looking at symptoms and illness in the medical system is just completely inverted. They don't see the symptoms for what they really are, which are things we shouldn't try to stop for the most part, because they're our body's way of trying to heal us. But if we don't remove the toxin, I mean, it's like if you have a river, which is a terrain, and that's not a theory, and then you're dumping industrial waste into the river, and the fish start dying and everything starts dying, or you get these algae blooms that were never there before, which choke out all this life and stuff, and the river becomes out of balance. You don't vaccinate the river. You don't start throwing antibiotics into the river. God knows, maybe they do, but there's no antibody or antibiotic for industrial waste. What you do is you stop putting the industrial waste into the river, and then nature will start to clean up the problem if it can. If it's too far gone and it's dying and it dies, then it's dead. But we don't need these things to come in and stop the natural systems, because all of the animals in the river are doing, and plants are doing what they can to restore balance to the river. And if the toxins would just stop, if they catch it in time, they will be able to restore that river. That's all it is. And it's like people say, well, you don't believe in bacteria. I believe there's bacteria, and you don't go play in a compost pile, do you? You don't eat poop. You don't, these are not things you don't, these are bacteria that are showing up to decompose flesh, and then they eat the flesh, and then they excrete the waste themselves, and it's the toxic thing. But if you were to get some of that toxin into you and your body responded through vomiting and sweating and fevers and this and that and the other, it doesn't mean that you're contagious and somebody else is going to get that. But everybody thinks, oh, this thing came in, and now it's going to come out through your mucus or whatever, and into the air, and everybody's going to get it. And then what do? They run off and they take all of their ivermectin and antibiotics, and it's crazy town. It's crazy town.
Well, and after this amount of time, I thought people would have caught on, but still, there's a lot not getting it. Just before we're going to wrap up, I was going to ask you what your thoughts on the old insects coming into the food chain, and there's also a patent that's saying that they're putting graphene oxide into the insects, and that's going to be one way to get that into you. And insects in our diet. In the local store, it's got insect patties,
Well, the insect thing is just another one of these, food scarcity things, like the eggs. And they roll out their movie stars to start, I saw Nicole Kidman eating insects. They're trying to, roll out their frontline puppets to sell you on this, because they want us to believe that the world is overpopulated and there are not enough resources. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't be responsible about our resources, always going back to if we really understand our decisions and how we live our lives always matters, we wouldn't make stupid decisions like pouring industrial waste into a river or destroying forests or these kind of things. But bringing out this whole eating insects thing, it's so clear if you just look at how it feels and use one of those senses that are not necessarily recognized by science. And that's just the easiest one, the feeling. I mean, you start getting into all kinds of other senses when you start talking about multidimensionality and other nations, from different dimensions and such. But just back to the insects, it's just a way to start conditioning people to them controlling the food supply, because the food supply, they want us eating what they want us eating because it's poisonous. And if we're in 15-minute cities, where we don't leave and all of the food's coming in that city, that's where we get our food, they can control us more. Now, as far as the graphene goes, I don't know. I personally, it's just my personal feeling, I feel that the biggest source of the heavy metals, or even probably, I don't know about graphene, but I would guess it's in everything, and it's in the air we breathe. So my suspicion is that it's a conductor of potential for back and forth messaging, through AI. This is another thing, this AI push, this, we're we're being conditioned, oh, we should eat bugs and fake meat that they make in labs, these burgers and things that are made out of God knows what, and don't pay attention to what they're spraying, and don't say anything about the bad water, go get your vaccines, all this kind of stuff. And we 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 don't take time to notice the depth of the conditioning. But all you have to do is just stop for a second and recognize that we're getting pushed into this AI thing.
Oh yeah.
And they try to make it attractive, and so we begin to use it more and more and become addicted to it more and more. And it reminds me of when I was in the hospital with Julia, my second daughter, uh, the one with the toxoplasmosis. She was born, and while I'm holding my new little baby and nursing her for the first time and just falling in love, the doctor comes in and says, "You're past due on your whatever vaccine it was." And he goes, "We're going to give that to you right now." And I'm like, looking at the baby, and they just give me the jab. And I leave the hospital, and I don't connect the dots, but I leave with Bell's palsy.
Right.
Of my face just froze up. And so what do? I go to a doctor, and then they send me to a neurologist, and they tell me, you probably have that. Either one or two things we could suggest as a possibility. It was either you were driving with your window down in your car and you were getting a draft on your face,
Right.
or there was some kind of draft at the hospital, like maybe an air conditioning duct or something
Right.
like that. So I'm just like, my face. So what do? They put me on steroids. And this is the point I'm going to make. So you go on steroids. I was on steroids, and like up all night, ironing and cleaning. And I was like, this is great. I've got so much energy. I was just a dynamo. And when it was time, to go off the steroids, you had to wean off, because what happens is the steroids take over your body's own natural production of steroids, and then it doesn't make them anymore. And to get your body to start making them, you've got to wean off the drug, because otherwise you could die, because you need that. So they weaned me off the steroids, and it was hard. The whole steroid thing was just a body wipe. It just wiped me out. And I'm bringing this in as a metaphor for the AI, because the more we become dependent on the AI, and I'm not saying all AI is bad, but I'm just saying the more we're not aware of the choices we're making in consenting to a lot of this AI stuff, then the harder it's going to be to charge back up our grounded connection to spirituality and whatever we consider source. Because in the spiritual efforts that people go through, in no matter what denomination or what modality, it's always about connecting to the earth and connecting to some form of source, whatever you believe that is. It's an energy thing, really, is what it is. And AI is meant to turn that off, because when you're connected spiritually, you're not easy to control. And so the goal is to gain control, which obviously we can see these 15-minute cities going up, it's pretty obvious what's going on. Then we need to have as little connection to our spirituality as possible. And if that happens and we lose it, then the AI is going to take over all of our critical thinking and our emotions and all this kind of stuff. And it's like the steroids. It's like your body will just shut off doing that for itself, because the AI will do everything for you. And so we can't allow ourselves, we have to be careful about what we consent to. And I see this agenda that's going on being multifaceted. It's about decreasing the population and making the population that's left easy to control. That's the way I see it. And I can see everything going on to get those metals in our bodies and turn off our spiritual, deaden that sun. You cover the sun because of the heating up of the planet, and then you don't get your melatonin production to put you into a deep sleep. What happens if you don't go into a deep sleep? You don't do your spiritual work at night. When you leave your body and you are processing and doing work all night long while you're in your dream state, whatever, you might remember some of it, you might not remember any of it, but nighttime is a very special time when you're sleeping and you're doing this work. Well, if you don't have the proper melatonin production, because they're deadening the pineal gland, then you basically have trouble getting into REM sleeps, difficulty sleeping. You don't clean out your brain at night. There's this whole thing about your brain clears out while you're sleeping, and you don't have that opportunity. You don't get the vitamins from the sun, the D and the K. You also, you stay indoors more when there's no sun, so you're not taking your shoes off and grounding to the earth and syncing up your rhythms with the earth. I mean, there's just so many things that are so multifaceted that we have to say ignorance is not an excuse. We're going to have to look into this, because there are just too many things I don't want to give up here. And it's a lot. And so this is where the beauty comes in, because this is where people go. I was just watching a really good, this guy, I can't remember his name. I think his name, Matt, maybe Roche or something. I can't remember. He'd be a good guy for you to have on. He does this thing where he makes these little antennas out of just a piece of wood, like a branch or a stick. And then he just wraps copper wire around and leaves a little tail on the bottom and the top and sticks it in the ground. And it helps the plants grow. It grounds the plant into the earth's own energy. And apparently, he did a whole podcast on it. You don't need any fertilizers. You don't need, anything, because basically you're allowing the earth to, and he says the plants so I started doing it. I went up to the hardware store and bought all this copper. And I just started because I live on a farm when I'm in Hawaii, my daughter's farm. So we're putting these sticks and all of this stuff and bigger ones for trees. Like, we're using branches that are thicker and getting heavier copper wire for those. And we're putting them all around to see if we get, and we're doing a little control experiment where, we're not doing it on some of the things that we're starting the starts, and then we're doing it on others. But this kind of thinking is much more like, would we have been pushed to think out of the box like this if we just kept going along the way we were going before, where we thought, oh, every every week was the same. You go to work, you get your lattes, and you meet your friends and go to the movies and do whatever. It's like we all grieve that life we had, but we were never really pushed to create new systems. And now I think the good news is, you know, there's just, there are so many people that are creating. I was listening to something on Crow the other day, and they were talking, had a couple on, and they were creating a sanctuary for birth and death. They had death doulas and midwives for birthing, and they're creating this sanctuary where you do this in a respectful way and not the way they do it in hospitals. Ugh, God, being in a hospital these days is scary.
It is indeed. It's a place to avoid.
Yeah, yeah, you end up on a ventilator for anything. I broke my toe. You better put you on a ventilator. Um, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at, Billy. I'm just, I'm glad to see so many good ideas coming out. I'm waiting for the systems to crumble. I think they are crumbling, but I wish it was happening more quickly. And this just forces people to recreate. And I really hope that as this happens, it's coming from the heart and not from, how can I make some money? And, you know, that they're, hear these chickens. This is what I'm telling you. Remember, this is right now it is 12:12. Isn't that interesting? 12:12. That's one of the portal numbers. And you hear the chickens out there? Hear it? They're, why are they crowing at midnight? Um, anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at. Um,
Yeah, I think that's basically a fair assessment of what's happened. This whole COVID thing was a key to responsibility, taking that back in all aspects of your life. And now it's not about, in one way it is to bring down the system, another way it's about trying to create new realities and different ways of doing things and put our imaginations to work and coming up with solutions that are better than the things that were given to us as a matter of convenience.
yeah, that's what I think too. And I think people, I'm not personally interested in trying to fix the systems. I think they need to go away.
No.
I don't vote anymore. It's ridiculous. I'm not participating in a big cheating machine. I'm just not doing it anymore. And I don't buy that there's, a difference between Democrats and Republicans or whatever. I mean, they showcase a difference and they attract different types of people, but it's just a divide and conquer. It's just a way to keep us fighting all the time. I'm just not interested anymore in this kind of, I don't even like to really read or follow the news too much anymore because it's just so full of this, constant, oh my God, I need to protest this, I need to fight against that. I just feel like for me personally, it's more important to start creating and being what I think is responsible and right, and actually put my efforts into creating that, which is what, I mean, that's what you're doing. I know you are working all week and not feeling like you have enough time to do the things you really want to do, but you're still doing them. And you have such great guests on your show, and you really, you write books and you're funny. I mean, you're being who you are, and you're doing it even if it's not working out perfectly financially, but maybe there's some lesson in there. I don't know what it is. It would be yours to figure out, but you're not squandering your time, let's put it that way. And that's something I don't, when I leave this body, I do not want to take a look at my life and say, you just squandered your life. You went in there to learn this lesson or do that or do this, and you had so many opportunities to pick up on the clues, and you just didn't want to do it. And I don't want to be in that position. I want to be able to say, look, I did my best to expand my awareness. Once it starts happening, It happens a lot, and you start expanding it, you know, all day long. You think about everything you think about. You think about the other person. You think about every encounter. You even think about, why did that person smile at me at the cash register? I mean, you think about everything. You start to see all of the little funny synchronicities and notice the little, I don't think there are any accidents, let's put it that way. And anyway, I feel like I'm rambling.
Well, it is late there. You've got an excuse. You're past midnight, you know.
Yeah, I was looking to see if there are any comments here.
There's been quite a few comments. People enjoying your patter. We're going to check out the previous interviews.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
You're going to check out your previous stuff. Yeah, basically, there's a guy at work the other day. I was talking about stuff. He says, "I know someone else like you. Why don't you just enjoy your life? Have fun." I'm like, "Well, I've got a child for a start, so you want to leave the world a better place for your children." And I think that idea, the Native Americans used to have that idea of being custodians for the earth and passing it on for 7 generations. But people don't have that idea that they're here as part of something and they have a responsibility to the earth and each other. Not on a climate fighting oil, that whole fake thing. Just for, not putting your rubbish and just being like a dog will tidy up its crap, but most people throw shit in the street kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, raise our consciousness and be who we are. And who we are is not the dumbed down Ottoman that has been created, our potential. But again, there might be some people don't even have a thinking element in their head. They're called NPCs and they can't. So there's a massive society just goes along with the program, and it's really up to the other ones at the side to come up and to be leaders to bring those people to us instead of to the government, really.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely people who feel somewhere in their gut or in their heart that they came to the lifetime with a purpose, with a sort of a purpose. They came to expand their consciousness and also serve in some way. And people who feel this feel it strongly. And it's at a knowingness place. It's not at a thinking place. They say things like, I don't know how I know it, I just know it. I can't prove to you, I don't have any papers that you can read that are going to show you that proof of something, I just know it. And these types of people are the ones I think that are kind of on the front line. And they're the ones that don't want to squander their time. And I think it's a difficult place to be because you could get derailed pretty easily if you don't stay grounded. And people, a lot of times, I think, a lot throughout history have had the best of intentions, but at some point they lost their grounding and, in some respect, got caught up in a way that was no longer possibly utilizing the time as wisely as they could. And so, again, we keep saying the same thing. It's our responsibility to look at that responsibility and say, that's not on anybody else. That's on me. I need to take a look. And I don't know. I'm always marveled by people who have the most horrendous. I don't know if you've heard of Annika Lucas. Do you know Annika Lucas?
No.
She just came out with a book. I think it's called Quest for Love or something. She's a one of the survivors that survived the child trafficking in Belgium. Hideous, hideous. Uh, I mean, you should read her book. She tells about what happened. She was basically trafficked to very high level government officials at the very highest. And she tells her whole story. And I look at people like this and I think, oh boy, did you take on a hard lesson in this life. For whatever reason, that was the choice. But I look at a person like her and the way she's, you should, if you read the book, you'd see what I mean. She just completely transformed her experience in a wise way where she completely acknowledges it. But she somehow, in all of what she went through, which is unspeakable, um, she saw a meaning. I
Kathy
people,
O'Brien's another one similar. She's
yeah,
made a film recently called Trance. It's worth the watching.
yeah,
But yeah, she's another beautiful soul that's dealt with all that shit
yeah. And
incredibly.
I know people take hard lessons in their lives before they come in. They they agree to take on a lesson for some reason or just be of service in some way. I can't speak for what that is for anybody but myself. But when I look at somebody like Annika Lucas, I think to myself, what a gift to society that you can show such spiritual awareness in the face of the most evil of evil. And you're sharing this with the world. I don't know. I really I have such respect for this because I think that we have sort of a conditioned response to think of people who have a hard time in life. you know, People will judge them and say, oh, that person, like a homeless person, it's a loser. How do we know that that person just didn't come into this life a little ahead of their time and they couldn't cope with the frequency here, the density of the frequency, and that maybe they're carrying a much higher frequency? And, you know, I don't know. I think every single situation is unique, but there's always something to consider. And I wouldn't be so quick to judge people, for what they do, because I don't know what they wanted to do before they came into their life. I just feel, for me personally, I don't want to miss the mark. And I feel like I've already made so many mistakes. I I haven't really come into my own expression until I went to film school, and I didn't go to film school till I was 48. I'm 62 now. So I feel like I went through a lot of tough things early on in life. We've had some tragedies in our family, and, um, I just feel that, everything has a reason, and it's my job to figure out what that is for me, but it's not my job to figure out what it is for somebody else. But it is my job to acknowledge that person as a connection to me, as I come across that person because something's being mirrored to me, or possibly vice versa. And so I just look at things differently now than I used to. And I don't know, I don't really have regrets. I look at my mistakes as opportunities to learn. And um, I feel like hardships, so that's why when we were talking earlier about, having to go to work every day, and I don't know, you're still doing what you do and you're still sharing who you are. And so something's going right. Something's going really right.
Well,
And,
I've
you know,
managed to keep the electricity bill man away from my door. I've got money to pay the bills, so these days you have to be thankful for some things. Even though
mhm.
we're doing stuff we don't like, ultimately that gratitude can tell the universe that you're grateful for it, and then you can, ask it for other stuff. But if you're
And
kind of bitching,
how do you know that you're possibly even holding some sort of space for the people that you're working with that don't, even just your presence, you don't even have to say anything, because you're vibrating at a frequency that might be a faster frequency. And just by being in that space, you're providing some sort of anchor, maybe. I don't know. This is just a thought. It's not my, I don't know, because I don't go to work and there and see, but I see what you do, and I see you as a very authentic person who expresses yourself very honestly. I thought your book was great, and I love your authenticity, and you know, I think that that's hitting the mark. You might not be making the money that would make life so much easier, but maybe that's not what it is right now. Maybe it will be later, maybe
yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. Basically, I do what I do, and basically, if people like it, and what happens is going to happen. And if I want to change things, then I've got the power every day to wake up and do something different. And as we all do, again, we all comes back to, instead of, sometimes you feel sorry for yourself, oh, I wish I had this, but ultimately, we're the ones with the power, and we have to acknowledge that. And if we want things to change, then it's up to you to change it. There's no getting away from it.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's helpful for me to back away and look at my life as like a TV show, and look at life on the planet as like a TV show. And I'm going, oh, look what the writers have up this week. Got everybody chasing their tail around the gain of function, or the bioweapon lab story, or the spike proteins. It's like, oh, look at all these storylines. They're going to keep the lie alive so that they can keep these episodes going. Then I stand back and look at it, and it almost becomes entertainment. But I'm not saying that recklessly. I just feel that sometimes it's helpful to back away, because when I look back, at myself sometimes from a distance, I think, oh, don't spiral down into some sort of a pity thing, or whatever. Or don't. I stand back and I look at it more objectively. And I recognize that the wound licking can be a little bit caught in the ego. And it's not to say that that's all that way. I think there's some necessity to licking the wounds and taking care of yourself. But I think the more you can look at it from a distant sort of way, like, oh, this is like David Icke always says, you're having an experience in a skin suit. And if you look at it that way, you go, oh, here's who I am in this lifetime, but I've been so many things. I've been everything, this is one little part that I'm playing in a play right now. And when you stand back and look at it, then you can actually kind of like that person better and go, oh my God, that's funny. Or, you could see, more of the flavor. And not, but when you're so inside your despair, it's easy to get locked into that. And I've been there, and it's hard to get out of. And these are the lessons of being human, right? I mean, we don't get out of them, that's for sure. I think coming onto the earth plane it's not a cakewalk. It's a tricky place to come to, I think.
yeah, it's a tough road. We're all walking it, and you've came on the show and you've gave a lot of wisdom, I would say, tonight. A nice way for people to think differently about things, because again, we can get lost in the political jargon and talking about that. But I think it was quite good to spend some time just talking about feelings and perspectives and all these things, and making people, I think, get a little bit more in touch with who they are and asking those questions. So thanks very much for that. Do you have any place that you're on social media these days that you talk to people? Are you shying away from all that stuff?
I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Telegram, just that one channel that I'm on. I follow a couple of channels. I don't spend a whole lot of time on social media. I used to, and it was sort of dominating my life. I was constantly checking the comments and realizing I was having discussions with bots. That was what did it for me. I got off Facebook like that. It was like there were some clues. You go in and you look at the profiles, and there's some clues, and you can see. And I was instructed how to do it, and I did it. And I was like, oh my God, I've been sitting here having these conversations over in these little corners with bots. It's a waste of time. So now when I'm in Hawaii, I make ceramics, I go to hula class, I go to earth prayer choir. I have all of my friends are into energy work of different types. And then, I'm trying to formulate what I want to do for a new film. And, so I'm spending my time being more creative. But, I still have my days where I feel, down, or I pick up on too much earth energy and feel heavily pressured, or, it's not like it's super easy, but the shift has happened where I just, and I feel a lot of people are doing this. They're moving more into what they want to be doing, when they, when they can, or even what they want to think. When I lay in bed at night, a lot of times I will do meditations in the middle of the night. I don't get up and do them. I just lay there and do them. And my daughter Julia, the one who talks of Lesmos, um, we went down to Mexico recently to a meditation retreat with Sarita Soul, who is she's got all kinds of wonderful meditation videos. And she just led the most fun retreat. It was really great. And with the first morning of the retreat, we were on the beach meditating at sunrise. And she said the whole week is going to be calling in the ally spirit of the whale. And so she took us through these meditations, looking into the eye of the whale, blah, blah, blah. And when the meditation finished and we all opened our eyes, 2 whales breached right at the end of the cove, right in front of us. It was like, these things just keep happening. And I don't know, it's where I think the beauty lies, I really want to come to where you live sometime, because you guys have so many great sites and these, these ancient ruins. And David Icke just did a really good, he did this Albion journey. I don't know if you saw that. It's on.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you did see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I'm like,
Well, I thought that was good. That was actually, I done a show at Comcast recently. I never finished it like this, but I was going to mention it at the end because I kind of started this revolution and the people are free. And then I was going to say, well, let's all go to the ley lines and start putting our energy into them, because that has a power. Obviously, you know about the whole meridian lines and the ley lines, and we don't, again, it's part of the energy system, the unseen that we're not tapping into and using, but it's getting used against us because I'm sure they're putting the negative vibes into those same places,
Yeah, they put their most important cathedrals and things on those ley lines, those energy centers, and they basically hijack the area. And that's what David Icke was doing in there. He was going back and reclaiming the energy by walking the circles. I thought it was a really interesting.
People again need to get into all that stuff and learn these things.
Yeah,
I'd love to. It's all woo-woo, but it's actually real.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, it's been nice chatting to you. We'll catch up with you again sometime. If you stay there just now, we'll get a wee chat after. Everyone else, hope you enjoyed that on a Sunday morning.
Thank you so much, Billy. It's always wonderful talking with you.
Okay, thanks for your time, everyone. Cheers now. We'll catch up soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.